Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph and today we're going to be talking about my best books of 2024. Last year I decided to turn my favorite books into an awards, kind of like the Goodreads awards. Also G from Book Roast does a book awards type of favorites video as well, so I will link that down below. I read 118 books this year and my average rating was a 3.3 stars, so I didn't hate everything that I read this year by any means, but I didn't have a lot of standouts. Obviously I have some things in my top books that I'm really excited to talk about, but nothing was really a 5-star. There is barely any 5 stars on this list. Most of them are 4 stars in the 4-star range. So let's get into it. Category number 1 is the best contemporary book that I read this year, and hands down it has to be All My Rage. All My Rage is by Isabelle and this is actually a YA contemporary that I've been putting off for years. I don't even remember when this came out. It is definitely a backlist. I think it's at least 3 years old. And I am a notorious lover of Sabatier, but I had been putting off her contemporary book because, well, YA contemporary is just not a genre that I reach for very often, to be honest. So this just kind of fell on the wayside, but I ended up picking it up and I loved it. It was very devastating. It was very Sabatier. She loves devastation. This book follows 2 teenagers, Sal and Noor, and they live in California where they're dealing with a lot of racism, a lot of Islamophobia, and they're also just dealing with a lot of family issues. Sal's mother is sick and Noor has lost her parents in an earthquake that happened many years ago. She's been raised by her uncle and her uncle is very possessive and a little bit abusive. But they find a lot of comfort in each other and their friendship, but something had happened where they started growing apart. And at the beginning of the book, we meet them where they're at this awkward stage of friendship, not really talking, something happened, and we're slowly piecing it together. There's also a third POV, which actually is Sal's mom's POV, but this is her POV from when she turns 18 and she enters into an arranged marriage. And it kind of pieces together bits of Sal and Noor's backstory as well, which was very interesting. I really liked the narrative structure of this, but overall it's just a very sad book. But this definitely had to be my favorite contemporary because while I read quite a few contemporaries this year that I really enjoyed, shout out to Old Enough and Interesting Facts About Space, which were 2 books that made me cry, All My Rage made me sob. Like I was commuting to work just sobbing. It probably didn't help that I was going through a lot with my job at the time, but like, man, the ugly cry that I cried was just like ridiculous. I actually had a really good romance reading year this year. I realized how much I love contemporary romance and how much I really need it as a palate cleanser in my life. But I've also kind of honed in on the type of romance that I love. I still love exploring the romance genre and seeing what really works for me and what really doesn't work for me. I surprise myself all the time, but I do love a small town romance. And if you add in cowboys, it's just... I'd have to say that Lila Sage has to be one of my favorite romance authors at the moment, and I could probably put all of her books on my favorite romances of this year. But of the 3 that came out in the Rebel Blue Ranch series, Swift and Saddled is the one that really stuck with me. I almost put Lost and Lassoed here, but I read Swift and Saddled so long ago and it's still something I think about regularly that it had to take the spot. But Lost and Lassoed is right there. It's right there. But there's just something so special about Ada and Wes. I loved their dynamic. I loved that Wes had anxiety and that was really explored and really talked about. Ada had her own issues that were really explored and talked about. They also had amazing chemistry. I loved the way that their whole situation played out from the moment they meet in that bar, because they meet in a bar and they kiss and then they find out the next day that they are boss and client. Like they're in a boss-client situation because Wes wants to remodel one of the ranches. It's like one of his huge projects. It's supposed to be like a life goal for him. And it's kind of a way to prove to his father that he's ready to take over the ranch and this business. And so when they find out that they will be working together, that she is who he contracted to help with this project, he's like, oh my God, I'm gonna ruin all of my chances to ever get this dream of taking over the business, but I also really like this girl. There's something about her. And Ada has been in a really horrible relationship. She's kind of trying to recover from that, and she's like, I just needed something fun and now this is awkward and what if he fires me? But they continue to work together and their chemistry is amazing. The things that they work through together, I just absolutely loved it. I love them as a couple. And even in Lost and Lassoed, it was just so cute seeing them together. I got really giddy seeing them. And that's also how I knew that I just love Wes and Ada. Like, I ride for them. But I do have like a shout out to Act Your Age Eve Brown, because that book made me cry and I thought about it a lot. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez made me cry and I thought about it a lot. But this is the one that like has stuck with me. Cozy fantasy isn't a genre that I reach for that often, but I found myself reaching for it a lot this year because I just needed comfort, to be completely honest. And much like contemporary romance, I did find a new favorite like cozy fantasy author. So she has been solidified as an auto-buy author for me from here on out. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon actually made it to my top. You know, the vampire one, the werewolf and vampire one was very close second. But honestly, this is the book that made me fall in love with Sarah Hawley. This is the book that made me want to read like everything by her, and then I did. And this one was just so fun. I love the chemistry. I love the storyline. I was just so surprised at how good the plot was, as well as how great the characters and the chemistry were in here. Because I have found with a lot of cozy fantasies, like the plot kind of goes to the wayside, but in here the plot is so interesting. So this follows our main character Mariel, and she is very bad at magic, but she's like supposed to be a prodigy at magic. She does have an affinity for earth magic, but to her mom and the society that she lives in, the society of witches that she lives in, earth magic is like very frowned upon. It's the lowest of the low type of magic. So one day while she's working on her spells, she accidentally summons a demon named Ozroth or Oz. And for demons in this world, when you summon them, the assumption is that you're gonna make a deal with them. And if you don't, you're kind of stuck with the demon and they're stuck with you. They can't leave until you make a deal with them. And because Mariel did this accidentally, she's like, no, I'm not gonna make a deal with you. You can't have my soul, weirdo. And he's like, I gotta go and do other things. So can you just make this deal with me so I can take your soul? And she's like, not gonna happen. So they're stuck with each other. And in this forced proximity, they end up falling for each other, and I love it. And there's also a larger plot happening in the background that unfolds, and like it does have a resolution for the most part, but it does also carry over into the subsequent books in this series, which I really love. I think that's super cool that in a cozy fantasy series, the plot is continuing forward in a very important way for the rest of the series. So I do feel like you have to read these in order. I read them in order. So I don't know if you would be lost if you read them out of order. Maybe references to things just wouldn't make sense, but the plot does build on itself. I think the reason that this really stuck with me and really made me realize that I love Sarah Hawley, because it is so hard to make me laugh in a book, but I was cracking up very early on in this book. And I loved the writing. I loved the way the characters were written. I loved the chemistry. I loved the banter. I loved the friendships. There wasn't much that I didn't like about this book or that wasn't working for me. And so I ended up reading all three, obviously, in the series. Really loved most of them. The second one was not my favorite. It has an amnesia plotline. Didn't love that. And then I found out that Sarah Hawley wrote a fantasy romance, and then I ended up loving that. So this was just a great find. Sorry if the angle is different. It has been super windy and it just was like out of control, and I was afraid that's all you could hear in the background. So it has finally calmed down and we are back. I read a lot of really great fantasy romance this year. I had a lot of fun with fantasy romance this year, but the one series that continues to stick with me and break my heart, because the fourth book was supposed to come out in June, I believe, and it is now, you know, January 2025 and it's still not out. So that contributes to me thinking about the series all the time, because I just want to know how it's going to end. But also I really loved this series, and I particularly loved Glow of the Everflame. So Glow of the Everflame is the second book in the Spark of the Everflame series. This is supposed to be a 4-book series, but again, the 4th book hasn't come out yet. This has been getting traditionally published, and they're actually about to publish the 3rd one traditionally. So I'm assuming that after that 3rd one gets published, the 4th one will be announced. But for now, there's a lot of dillying and dallying with this 4th one. But I can't lie, I had so much fun with this world. I had so much fun with these characters, but this particular book in the series was just like above and beyond all of the rest of the books in this series. I really liked Spark of the Everflame and I really liked Heat of the Everflame, but Glow of the Everflame was on a whole different playing field. It was in a completely different universe. We got so many great character dynamics in here. We had so many amazing moments with our love interests. I really like the romance in this one. The world starts to expand. The politics start to expand. Like everything starts to get bigger and more intense, and the stakes start to get higher in this book. And I just love a second book because of that, where you're already familiar with the world, but you're also not super familiar with everything, and there is always something left to learn. The romance still has a lot of tension, so a second book usually works really, really well for me. So in Spark of the Everflame, we are following our main character, Diem, and Diem's mother has mysteriously disappeared. Because of this disappearance, Diem is put in a very precarious situation because she wants to investigate what happened to her mother, but on the other hand, her mother was a serving woman in the royal court, and Diem fears that if she doesn't take the place of her mother, her brother will get kicked out of this royal academy that he's in, and really the only reason he is in it is because her mother is in this position. So she ends up taking the position, and she is swept up in this royal court and all of the machinations happening within the royal court, but at the same time she's dating this guy named Henry, and Henry is part of this rebellion group. So Diem is kind of torn between these two worlds, and she's also being faced with two different realities. So there are a lot of political machinations in here. There's a lot of twists and turns in terms of what's happening with the rebel group, what's happening with the royal court, and things that eventually happen to Diem. And we get to see a big expansion on that in the second book. We get to see more of the actual love interest in the second book because the guy, Henry, that she's dating is not the love interest. That is very well known. That is not a spoiler. But I also like to warn people going into the series that Henry is not the love interest because he spends a good amount of time in the first book with Diem. He sucks. He really sucks. He really, really sucks. But the actual love interest, my man, my man, my man. For me, this was such a fun series, and it was so easy to marathon, and it was all I wanted to read. I had so much fun with this one. My favorite fantasy was actually so easy to select, and it was The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. I loved my experience reading The Ruin of Kings. I'm irritated at myself that I haven't actually finished this series yet, and I'm soon to be restarting this and starting over with the series to finish it because I waited too long. I also find this book so hard to explain to people, but we're gonna try our best. So this follows a main character named Kieran, and we are following his life between two timelines. And these two timelines are told by two different people. So when we meet Kieran, he is in jail. We don't know why, but there's a character named Talon, and literally one of her first lines is, "Tell me a story." And so they both tell the story of Kieran's life and how he got to this point. What we know about Kieran is that he grew up in the slums, he was a thief, and he was raised by a minstrel. But one day, Kieran's real family, supposedly, claims him as a long-lost prince, and this sets off a series of events. And so that is the story that Talon and Kieran are telling. And the fun part about this is there are footnotes. So you will see down here that there are a bunch of footnotes. And so when Talon and Kieran are telling their story, they are getting interrupted by these footnotes, and these footnotes are a mysterious character. It's an unnamed character. We don't know until the very end who this character is, but they interrupt with factual information or correcting information in these stories. And I just think it's really funny because obviously with storytelling, especially a narrative structure like this, the characters are going to be unreliable, right? It's all based off of their memory and interpretation of a situation. So it's really fun to have these footnotes that are kind of interrupting that and correcting things because it feels very real. It feels very much like when you're telling a story to your friend. It's all about your remembering of it and like your interpretation of the situation. So I really love the narrative structure in that way. The other thing I love about this narrative is the fact that it's these dual timelines told by two different people, and it feels like dual timelines told by two different people. These characters have very distinct voices and very distinct ways of speaking and telling stories. It's also extremely funny. I think all of the characters, maybe not Kieran, but I think most all of the characters are pretty funny in here. The only thing about this book is it's extremely convoluted, but I actually find that to be really fun, and I think it fits very well with the narrative structure as well as the tone of this book because there is a bit of an unserious tone to it at times. Also, this has so many twists and turns, and that's what I mean by I waited too long to move on to the third book that I have to restart it because there are so many things that I forgot and I just don't want to feel lost. Yeah, also, I would love to reread this because I'm sure there's so much that I missed and I think it would be really fun. I think about this book a lot, so rereading it also seems like a very fun time right now. And I can't wait to see where the rest of the series goes because I know that not all of the books follow Kieran, and we get to really explore other characters that are very fascinating to me, and there are new characters that I haven't even met yet that I've only heard about and I really want to meet. So I have a feeling that this could be like one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. I just need to get through it. I feel like my favorite horror book is so obvious, but it's Bloom. It was a toss-up, I can't lie. It was a toss-up between Bloom and Natural Beauty. But the thing about Bloom is it was a grower. It was a grower. It grew something in my brain and altered my chemistry because I can't stop thinking about this book. Like, I think about it once a week, if not more than once a week. Something will come up and it always leads back to Bloom. And it changed me. It changed me in a way that's probably not positive. This book was one of those books that I read it in one sitting and I put it down and I said, I think I hated this book. And then I was like, wait, no, maybe I love it. Maybe it's actually the best, most brilliant book that I've ever read. And over time, with other people reading it, like making other people read it or other people picking it up because of how I was talking about it or how Sarah in my Patreon was talking about it, it made me realize how much I loved this book and how much it changed me. And it's just a very simple premise. There's a woman named Rosemary. She just got out of a really bad and long relationship with a man. She goes to the farmer's market. She meets this woman named Ash who sells like cupcakes and flowers. And for the first time ever, she's like, wow, I think I'm attracted to women. So she starts trying to pursue Ash and it becomes this really obsessive relationship between the two of them. And I think that many people will guess where this is going, but there are so many little twists and turns that make it a very unexpected and gruesome read. One of the blurbs on here says sapphic longing with a dash of darkness, and the other one says an elegantly written nightmare. Nailed it. Nailed it. As y'all know, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I love listening to audiobooks. I read physically as well, but audiobooks are just really fun for me. I love immersion reading. I love doing things around the house and listening to a book, being told a story. When I'm playing my little cozy video games, being told a story, it's like my favorite thing. So I definitely had to put an audiobook category on here. And my favorite audiobook this year, hands down, has to be Blood Over Bright Haven. It also helps that this was a favorite book as well. And I think a big contributing factor to that, other than I just love ML Wong, is also that Moira Quirk narrated the hell out of this book. I know most people know Moira Quirk from Gideon the Ninth audiobooks if you've listened to those, and I know that she puts on a very specific voice and acts a very specific way for that audiobook, and it's because it fits the narrative style of Gideon the Ninth, but she actually very much switches up how she is narrating this story and telling this story. And it just goes to show that like voice actors are so good at what they do. Like when they're good, they are good. I think the audiobook experience is very much worth your time as well as reading it physically, but I had such a fun time listening to it. So in Blood Over Bright Haven, we are following a main character named Siona, and Siona has spent 20 years of her life trying to become a high mage. And in this society, in the Tyrian society, high mages have historically been men. The thing is that Siona is very single-minded in her pursuits. She is one of those people that she thinks she's paving the way, she thinks she's opening the door for other women, but actually she's kind of closing it behind her as well as for other people. She's very narrow-minded in the things that are happening around her, and when she ends up becoming a high mage, she gets assigned this assistant, and this assistant actually is a janitor. And this janitor / her new assistant is named Tommel, and Tommel is from a group of nomadic hunters. These nomadic hunters were driven out of their homes 10 years ago, trying to escape this thing called the Blight. Tommel ended up making it across the border to Tyrian, and so what he starts to see in his experience is that many of these nomadic hunters who have sought refuge within the Tyrian borders are treated as second-class citizens. When he's teamed up with Siona, what Siona is experiencing for the first time is the reality of the racism that happens within Tyrian. And I think that their dynamic is so well done and so interesting. I think that Siona is a very interesting character who you are meant to really dislike and want to throttle because she is so frustrating. I think it was very important for us to follow Siona as a main character based on what I believe we were supposed to get out of this story, the themes, the messages, the morals. And I think that her character arc fits so well with this this story. I absolutely loved this. Like at first I finished it and I was like, yeah, I liked that. I really liked that. ML Wong is one of my favorite authors for character work. And it's like whether you love or hate or are in between about a character, like you know that that character is going to be memorable. But as I stepped away from this book and my experience reading this book, I realized that it was like really sticking with me and I was thinking about it all the time. And I ended up giving this a 5 stars. So Emma Wong did it again. She gave me another 5-star read. And lastly, my favorite book of the year, my best book of 2024, it had to be her. It had to be Assassin's Fate. I am not going to be able to talk to you about this book, not because it's the last book in the realm of the Elderlings, but because I'm still extremely emotional over this. And I literally read this in like January or February. So to catch you up if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is the last book in a series called The Realm of the Elderlings. The Realm of the Elderlings is made up of 5 series, interconnected series. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, you do have to read these in order. A lot of people believe that you can jump between either the Farseer trilogy or the Life Ship Trader trilogy as your first entry into Robin Hobb. And while that is true, you can enter into either one and not necessarily be spoiled for one or the other. I personally believe that the Farseer trilogy gives you the best context for things that happen in the Life Ship Trader trilogy. I also think there are a lot of Easter eggs in the Life Ship Trader trilogy that you would miss if you haven't read the Farseer trilogy. However, that being said, some people don't like the Farseer trilogy or a lot of the subsequent series in this book because we are following a main character named Fitz. And a lot of people don't like to be in Fitz's head because it is first-person POV. So if you were never planning to read any of the trilogies that Fitz is in, you could read the Life Ship Trader trilogy and then move into the Rainwild Chronicles, but those are really the only 2 that you could read in the Realm of the Elderlings that would make sense together. Otherwise, the rest of the series, the rest of the books in the series just wouldn't make sense to you. And since I believe that you should read the Farseer trilogy first and foremost, in the Farseer trilogy, you meet one of my favorite characters of all time, my baby, Fitz Chivalry. We meet him when he is 6 years old, and it comes out that he is the bastard son to the prince-in-waiting Chivalry. When this news is revealed that he has a bastard, Chivalry flees the kingdom and abdicates the throne. Not long after he flees and leaves the kingdom, he actually ends up passing away. So Fitz never gets a chance to meet his father, but his grandfather, the king, decides that they are going to take in Fitz and train him to be an assassin because the king fears that if Fitz grows up to be resentful of his father and the kingdom, that he would try to come after the throne. Fitz is trained by Chade, who is a very big character within the series, and mainly raised by the stable master / Chivalry's best friend, Burrich. And so Burrich tries his best to raise Fitz. But the thing about the Farseer trilogy, the thing about the Realm of the Elderlings, is all of these characters are very flawed. They're very sad characters, they're very broken characters. And that continues with every generation. So Fitz has a very tragic life. And I think the most amazing thing about the Realm of the Elderlings is we meet Fitz when he is 6 years old. And in this book, in this series, he is in his 60s. So we get to see him literally from childhood to adulthood and like being old. It's so incredible to see this journey. Like, we don't get to see every single second of every moment of his life and getting older, but we see him at very pivotal moments in his life and pivotal moments in growing up. And I think that's why people love Fitz so much, because Fitz is a big fat dummy. He's a big dummy. He is a broken person, just like all of the people who raised him and that he's been around, but he just... there's just something special about him, and I think it's just that you want to protect him. You've met him as a child and you know exactly why he is the way that he is. And so in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the last trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings, this being the very last book in that trilogy, we're seeing so many things getting tied up. We're seeing so many relationships getting tied up. We're getting answers to questions that we've had for books and books and books. But also there are just particular character dynamics that you get to see play out in a particular way that like I never expected, and it's just too much. All I can say is this genuinely for me was absolutely the perfect ending to this series, especially because for me, I've said this many times, Robin Hobb is not the best at endings. Notoriously throughout the Realm of the Elderlings and all of the trilogies that I've read, we've never gotten the most satisfying ending that we could. And I felt like she was just very weak at endings. Like she just didn't know how to end it, or maybe didn't want to end it. And that's why it's such an expansive series. But I felt like she has a brilliant mind, because I think this was her ending all along. Like I do feel like this is why she continued coming back to these characters and continued writing in this world. Even when she thought it was over, she continued because this was the ending that needed to happen. And it's funny because this trilogy as a whole wasn't shaping up to be my favorite trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings in general, but because of this ending, it's like it has to be. It has to be. So this has to be my favorite book of the year because I've just been on such a journey. I've been on such a journey with this series. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for sticking through this video with me. It's been chaos. Behind the scenes, it's been chaos. I'm hoping the video doesn't feel chaotic, but it was chaos to film. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Let me know down below your favorite books of the year, your #1 favorite book of the year, or if you want to tell me what your favorite book was for each of these categories. I would love to hear what you were loving last year. But if you just want to leave an emoji to say hi, feel free to leave a bee emoji down below, and I will talk to y'all next time. Bye, friends.